Sonic Prime Season 3. It's on the way soon, and it's one of the more divisive things in the Sonic fanbase, amongst everything in the Sonic fanbase. It seems like we are set up for a thrilling conclusion to what we left off with at the end of Season 2, where 9 shows his true colors and becomes the true villain of Sonic Prime. For people who like Sonic Prime, this should be more than enough reason to actually watch the show. As someone who didn't think the show was perfect, I can definitely appreciate what it's done. And while there's a lot of things I don't love about the show, I do think Season 2 was a vast improvement. And overall, I think the show does a really good job of what it sets out to do, which is expand the Sonic the Hedgehog IP. I'm still of the mindset that this can definitely become the best Sonic show ever, assuming that it really reaches a fitting conclusion. And the narrative that the team has built up for Season 3 is definitely compelling enough to watch. Overall, I'm just really excited for the new season, and I think you should be too. But the debate and discourse surrounding this show has been hot. Ever since it came out, there's been a lot of discussion about this show. Some really favorable, some people love it, and then some people just hate it. Some people call it mid, whatever you want to call it. But the people that hate this show, the people that are not fans of Sonic Prime, one of the biggest, most unforgivable sins is the fact that the Sonic Prime producer has said that the show is canon to the main series, and now the Sonic lore has become even more complicated. As of today, we had brand new statements about this, about the show being canon and how it's going to fit into the game universe. I've actually made a few videos about this. I made a video about this right when the show came out, and it was extremely popular. I also recently dove into this topic in a recent discussion video, but due to the fact that I was talking about like 4 different topics in that video, I was talking about IDW, I was talking about Prime, I was talking about shit, I was talking about a bunch of different things. In addition to the new information that Ian Flynn just relayed today, I think we have enough to make like a standalone video. So this discussion really gets its own kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like this discussion get its own video, its own title, its own thumbnail, and we can just focus on this with all the new information. So with that being said, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now if you're a Sonic fan. I'll give you a second to do that. And hopefully you smash the like button and join the discussion down below as well. So why don't people like the fact that this show is canon? Wouldn't you want to see all Sonic media kind of like tied in together? You know, hire a lore manager to ensure the universe is more meaningfully connected across games, animations, comics, and more? I've said this a lot of times, but don't worry. This is actually going to be really important and really relevant to this video, so please keep paying attention. Well, it's very simple and almost reasonable to understand why people think that. First of all, people think that there are a lot of contradictions between the actual Sonic lore and some of the stuff that goes on in this show. They absolutely hate the way that Sonic is portrayed in this show. They think that this is the most childish and possibly dumb version of the character. Now, whether you agree with that or disagree with that is neither here nor there, but let's continue to the other reasons why people think the show can't be canon. People think it's a major contradiction that Sonic says in the show that there can be badniks without flickies. They think it's a contradiction that when Sonic meets Chaos Sonic, he almost acts like he's never seen a robotic version of himself before, which would be weird because if the show's canon, obviously Metal Sonic is a huge part of the Sonic lore, so that doesn't really make that much sense. Although my rebuttal to this is, does he ever explicitly state that there was never a roboticized version of him? Or are we just implying that it seems off that he doesn't quite make a reference or flashback to Metal Sonic? Because I don't think it quite rules it out. Another big criticism, and we'll kind of address all of this once we get into the actual statements by Sega, is that, you know, people don't like that the entire cast live in Green Hill. I don't even know if that's like actually the case, which I get it, it kind of makes sense, but is it truly a major detail? I don't know. Let's get into the Sega statements though, because it gets a lot more interesting, and it's also going to provide us some context about how the show could potentially be canon, the whole Sonic lore manager thing, and why we really should be looking forward to Season 3. Let's roll the clip.
8. How is Sonic Prime canon despite contradicting the lore of the games in so many ways? I can't help but wonder why bother creating a lore team if the next major project contradicts the lore so heavily. Also, what does "my hands are tied" mean regarding the badniks/flickies?
Number one, as I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to talk about how Prime fits into the canon until the show is done. I don't want to spoil anything. Number two, I can't pull back the curtain too far on stuff, but Prime was well into production before the Lore Council was a thing.
Yep.
Corrections were made, but the Lore Council was not overseeing the project. We are one department out of many, and an animated production already has a lot of gears turning in their own right. So we did what we could, when and where we could.
Yes.
As for the hands are tied, I don't know the context of that one.
It might be the badniks and flickies in Prime they're referring to.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
And I don't know what the issue is there. I don't know whose hands are tied. I mean, if I said something at some point, I don't think it was that important because I don't retain it at all.
Here's the other clip that we discussed last month that's going to provide some context for you as well. This was from the original discussion that we had a couple weeks ago.
Sonic fans.
Yeah. And would you say the same pretty much applies to Prime as well? I mean, there's some concern about that. I know you can't talk
Prime
too much
is
about
its
it.
own. Prime is a kind of a special case, and I can't get into it without spoiling the end of the season 1. So,
right.
And none of this season 1, 2, 3 nonsense. It's season 1. Netflix is just chopping it into pieces.
Thanks, Netflix, for nothing. All right, here's one from...
After seeing all that, it's pretty safe to assume why Sonic Prime will be canon. We're going to have to tune into Season 3 and maybe beyond. I don't know. I mean, that's probably wishful thinking. I like Sonic Prime. I really do. I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. We're going to have to tune into the future seasons of the show in order to find out how it fits into the canon. Now, the reason why this could work is because Sonic Prime is stated to take place into the future. I know I made a video recently on YouTube Shorts asking when it takes place, and I kind of forgot about this, but it's been stated that Sonic Prime takes place well into the future of the games. At least it's like a post-Frontiers kind of thing. Now, is that going to change? I don't know. Honestly, though, it's really hard to gauge when the show takes place. I mean, if it takes place after Frontiers, it's kind of like, there's no way that this Sonic right here that we see in Sonic Frontiers Update 3 is anything near remotely close to the Sonic that we see in Sonic Prime. Like, how does Sonic do this in Sonic Frontiers Update 3 and then just like revert back to how he is in Sonic Prime? We'll get into this very shortly after we talk about the big revelation about the Lore Council first, though. You heard Ian Flynn himself say that the Lore Council had to make some changes. And by the way, this whole Lore Council thing, the Sonic Prime show was well into production prior to the Lore Council that I've talked about so much being formed. Now, this is a big deal because a lot of people who doubt what Sega's trying to do with the lore going forward can probably rest a little bit easier knowing that some of the contradictions that they may see are not the fault of the current Lore Council. It's not Ian Flynn's fault. It's not anyone's fault. So it makes me a lot more intrigued to watch the new season, and it's definitely going to be a very big plot twist or something interesting at the end or something like that, because it's going to actually tie into the canon. So we're just going to have to be patient. And the last thing I'll say is this. The reason why I don't think it's ruled out that Sonic Prime can be canon is because I personally, this is my personal belief, is that the contradictions are minor. These are stuff that like hardcore Sonic fans take issue with, but like the general audience is not going to necessarily care about the exact proximity of where Sonic and friends live. First of all, Green Hill's in every game, so why wouldn't they just throw them all in Green Hill? You know what I mean? Minor inconsistencies happen in Sonic games all the time. I mean, the moon literally explodes in half in Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, look at it right here. And in the very next scene of Shadow the Hedgehog, the moon is back. There's nothing wrong with it. Does that make that game not canon? Sonic's character is a lot more serious in Sonic 06, like he was in a game like Frontiers, only to a couple games later be completely goofy and childish like he is in Prime a few games later. So it's like, is Sonic Colors not canon? You know, oh, why isn't Knuckles on Angel Island? Well, I mean, Knuckles hasn't been seen on Angel Island in a Sonic game in a very, very long time, other than the Sonic Frontiers prologue. The Bad Nix Flickies thing, like, that's what most like casual people think about Sonic anyways. Could all these characters actually live in Green Hill? Well, if the show takes place in the future, then that kind of means that anything is possible. Remember, at the end of Sonic Frontiers, the arc with Knuckles, he was basically saying he wants to go out on his own and be more independent instead of being cooped up on his island. Tails wants to go off on his own and stuff like that. It could certainly explain why Knuckles may be hanging out in Green Hill. The point I'm trying to make here is this ain't new, man. Sega's been doing this. They've been inconsistent with a lot of stuff in the Sonic franchise. I'm not going to disagree and say that these aren't inconsistencies, but these are the inconsistencies that I would have a major issue with. Timeline altering stuff that completely retcons things that happened in the past. That is where I would take major issues with any inconsistencies that we would see in Sonic Prime. Not minuscule details, because the minuscule details have always been kind of off in the Sonic franchise. For example, maybe altering when and how Sonic and Knuckles met. It's reasonable to assume that their first dialogue could have taken place in Hidden Palace, because the characters can't talk in that game, by the way. A lot of people point to this scene and say, oh my god, this is inconsistent. You know, if they said Sonic and Knuckles originally met at like an Eggman lab and after Sonic Adventure 2, then yeah, that is a major inconsistency. That is like altering the timeline. That is when it becomes a problem. As far as I'm aware, that doesn't happen in the show, although they really flirt with this idea when they reveal Chaos Sonic for the first time. But like I said before, there's nothing that explicitly states that Sonic has never seen a metal version of himself before, but it's like dangerously close to that retcon. But again, he just seems surprised, and maybe he could have made a reference to Metal Sonic, but he never said, I've never seen a robot me before. If he did say something like that, that would completely render the show uncanny. And the people who are criticizing the show would certainly be right in that respect. So, more major revelations and just more reasons to look forward to Sonic Prime. Season 3 will hopefully answer a lot of questions. And while yes, there are inconsistencies, I don't think they are like world-breaking enough to not hear Sega out and see what they got cooking for Season 3. But you guys can disagree with me. Like I said, I tried to make sure that the other side's viewpoints were definitely heard because they're not wrong about a lot of things. But I'm going to wait and see to see how it all ties together in Season 3. So let me know what you guys think down below.